Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Finding Your Inner Knowing with Cat Baverstock. We talk about how magical things can happen when people overcome their limiting self-beliefs, her passion for working with people, and why she's known as the witchy psychologist.
Cat is a consultant clinical psychologist, yoga teacher, and reiki practitioner. She has worked in the area of mental health and personal development for over 25 years. Having worked for many years in the NHS, Cat now runs a successful private clinic in Sevenoaks Kent. She specialises in mind-body work using eye movement desensitisation. In 2018, Cat set up an empowerment project called Grow With Your Flow. The aim of the project is to support people across their inner wisdom, overcome obstacles and follow their callings and passions in life. Cat uses a unique approach drawing on her experience across the disciplines of psychology, coaching and yoga meditation and energy work, helping people to connect to their talents, motivation and follow their dreams. So Cat, welcome to the Inspiration North podcast. It's so lovely to see you. Going back to childhood, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
The thing that I wanted to be when I was a child was a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what I became. But there is an interesting story connected to that, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But yes, I wanted to be a dancer. My best friend became a dancer. And so I was always very envious of the fact that she was able to do that. And I didn't really know what I wanted to be other than a dancer. Yeah, it was only until I was in my teens that I decided to do psychology. So certainly I did not plan to be a psychologist. But the thing that I was going to tell you was that weirdly, I'm looking to do an online type of course, and that will involve dance. So never give up on what you want to do. But yes, in the traditional sense, it didn't happen in the way that I would have imagined.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was very physical, I was very sporty, and I loved all things movement. So that was probably why I had, it's a girly childhood dream, isn't it?
Yeah, I tried to do ballet, and I was kicked out of ballet because they realised that my body type wasn't going to be conducive to being a ballerina.
So that was that then.
Yeah, so I did judo instead.
Well, I did try I did ballet probably for a very short period of time, similar issue. But I also did other dance like throughout my early life, so salsa, and did a bit of Irish dancing.
Oh, cool.
So I did try out different ones. But yeah, that's what I really wanted to be when I was younger. So it was only really when I was older that I, went off in different directions. But yeah.
So why did you choose psychology?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Why did I choose psychology? Well, I think if I look back, I had that interest in both the sciences and the arts. So even though I wasn't strictly good at art in the way that, people expect you to be, I was aware that I had a kind of creative mind. And it was only much later, actually more recently, that I've begun to explore that. So I write poetry now, and I've only just probably in the last couple of years started to do that. So but I think I was aware that there was that element of me that existed, but I didn't really understand it. But I was brought up in quite an academic family, so kind of science was also quite highly regarded. So I had a bit of both going on, in the sense that I quite like creative humanities arts, and I also quite like the science and quite like physics and that type of thing. So I think by the point I got to thinking about what sort of degree I wanted to do, psychology was broad enough just to be something that might tick all the boxes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I actually got on the degree that I realised I loved it. So I was lucky in that regard, because the reality was I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
No, I don't think many 18-year-olds do know what they want to do. So yeah, I think
it's quite difficult, isn't it, when you're 18, I think, to know what, you know. And I was quite busy, I wasn't really massively academic early on. I was a bit of a late developer. So in that regard, I didn't have a clear idea. I was just lucky, I think, but I went to do psychology and then I really enjoyed it. So yeah, so that's how I kind of got into psychology. I didn't really have a kind of clear idea that that's what I wanted to be. So, but when I went on to the degree, I started to get interested in the cognitive psychology and clinical psychology, and I did a course in psychoanalysis. So I was quite interested in that, counselling, psychology, and everyone said, "Oh, you know, you're never going to get to do clinical psychology. That's really difficult. You know, not going to get into doing that." And I was like, "Oh well, I can try." And then after that, I did quite a lot of research. So I didn't go straight into clinical psychology. I went into research.
Okay.
I did a lot of research in looking at women who use drugs, who use substances, and looking at their needs. So I did a couple of years in London doing research. And then I moved up north, actually, funnily enough, in Manchester. I did some more research looking at young drug users around the country, because there was a kind of spike in heroin use at that point. So I was a young researcher and I traveled around the country doing interviews. And I realised that I actually really enjoyed doing the interviews and not so much of the report writing and all of the kind of, although I did enjoy doing it, it wasn't really my passion, so to speak. Over time, and then went and did a few more years in research, and then I began to realise that I wanted to apply to do the clinical training, but I didn't have any clinical experience. So I then went to do an assistant psychology job in forensics. And then in the year 2000, I got on the course, and that's how I ended up doing clinical psychology. But weirdly enough, when I got onto the course, there was also that part of me again that wasn't exactly sure. So that theme of not exactly being sure this is exactly what I want to do. But I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I did it. But yeah, that's how I ended up doing psychology.
Yeah, it's quite. It is a difficult clinical psychology. We were pretty much told we had no chance in hell when we were doing our undergraduate degree. So
yeah, I was told the same thing. I was told the same thing, you know, because I didn't go to a kind of, you know, top-notch university or anything. I went to University of Westminster, which, you know, was a good uni in London. I enjoyed it, but I was told, you know, you're not going to get on clinical psychology. It's not going to happen. But I don't know whether it's just something about me, but I just think, well, you know, maybe not. And I did have a passion for, you know, working with people therapeutically. And I'd done a lot of research, so I had a really solid research and academic grounding, which I think really helped. But most of all, I really enjoyed working with people. So I think that passion came across in the interview, and luckily I got a place to do my training, and yeah, that's how it all came about, really.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what was next after that, when you were a doctor?
So when I was a doctor, yes. I went to work in London. I worked around the Elephant and Castle for a couple of years, worked in CAMS, so child and adolescent mental health services. So I suppose by that point, I'd become interested in working with young people. So young people and families, but also teenagers and adolescents. So I did a few years working in the centre of London, working in some pretty deprived areas of London. Pretty tough job, but really, really enjoyed that. And then I went to work in I suppose it was like a unit for young people who had committed crimes but were on welfare orders. It's closed now, but at the time it was a social care funded unit. And I really began to enjoy that. So I really enjoyed working with a staff group as well as the young people. And I was beginning to find my niche then, that I was really enjoying that. But then unfortunately that closed down. And so then what job did I do next? I'm trying to think which job I did next. I can't remember exactly. It seems like a long time ago now. But I basically worked for a number of years in CAMS. Oh, that's right. I went to the Tavistock. I ended up at the Tavistock working for the youth offending team in Camden.
Oh, wow.
That was my next job. And I was there for about 3.5 years. And again, working in a really diverse borough. It was brilliant. I loved it, working in Camden, working with all sorts of different people, again, working with a team. And yeah, that was fun. So that was kind of my main beginning in my career in terms of psychology. And then I got married and moved up north to Lytham St Anne's, had my little boy, and then after a couple of years moved back down to where I am now in Kent. And then I did a little bit more work in adolescent. I started to become more interested in working with adolescents and units, psychiatric units. So working with staff teams, but also working with young people as well. And that was kind of my aim. That's what I really wanted to do. And I did do that for quite a few years. But then it's funny, isn't it? You get to a point in your career when you think, well, okay, well, I've kind of done what I've set out to achieve. You know, I've done what I wanted to do. And, you know, now what? So I kind of got to a point in my career when I wasn't exactly sure where I was going to go next. And then that sort of set a whole series of events in motion. So I moved into another CAMS role, but I just wasn't enjoying it as much as I had hoped, let's say. I think things within CAMS had changed a lot, and, you know, all sorts of systemic and organisational things had changed. But actually, I think I had changed as well. And I had my second son by that point, so I wanted something a bit more flexible. So someone said to me, oh, you know, why don't you go and work privately? Privately? How can you say such a thing? We were, you know, we didn't really consider private work. So that was quite an adjustment in terms of thinking about moving and transitioning out of the NHS and moving into setting up my own business. So yeah, that was huge. Yeah, it was like I left a tribe, you know. Like I had to kind of go, okay, tribe, I'm going to have to go now. I'm leaving. And that was quite hard in many ways, but quite liberating in others. So then I set out to set up my practice. And then probably a year or so, maybe a year and a half or so into that, that's when I came on the TPPA course, which you know all about because you were first.
So explain to our listeners whatever it is.
My next question.
Can we remember what it is? Remember what it is?
The Psychology Practice Accelerator program.
Psychology Practice Accelerator, yeah. So I had got to the point where, you know, I think we all get to that point at times in our careers where we just feel like we're almost not standing still, but treading water would be a good way to describe it. Sort of treading water, but we're not really moving anywhere in particular. And that's how I began to feel, that although I loved my work, that somehow I was just beginning to tread water, and that I wasn't really. And I think that partly that comes from having a number of years out as well, and having children, and you know, that really takes up so much time. It's quite difficult to get that time to read and be inspired and listen to podcasts and do all those things. So I began to wonder, you know, what direction I was going to take, and I had no idea. And it was a really strange set of events that brought me to the TPPA, because I was actually sitting in a coffee shop with a friend of mine, and I remember Wendy, 'cause obviously she's just been on your podcast, Wendy's email popping up saying, oh, I'm offering a free coaching session, and would you like to, not to me specifically, but just offering it. I remember thinking, oh, maybe I should try something just different. And little did I know what then would transpire, which was to make a decision to come on a coaching course, which was something that I hadn't, again, really set out to do. It wasn't in my plan. Not that I particularly had a plan, to be fair, but it wasn't really in my plan. So yeah, it was kind of a funny set of events. And then going on the course, because the thing is that I came onto the course with a particular idea. I wanted to develop my ideas around leadership and organisations and organisational psychology. But strangely, I didn't do that. I actually didn't develop that. What I did was, and I don't know what your experience was, but my experience was that I really focused in on what were my passions, what really lit me up. And that wasn't something I'd ever done before. It's not the sort of thing you do, is it?
No, we just follow the path blindly and go from job to progression to promotion to, oh crap, I wasn't expecting to be here.
And even at school, it's not really something you get to focus on. You don't really get time to focus on what is it that you love. What do you love to do? It's always more about achievement, isn't it? And keeping up. And I don't know, that's just my impression. So for the first time in my life, probably, I suddenly had this space to explore what really lit me up, what really got me going, and what inspired me. And so the two main themes that came out of, I did like a sort of exploration, like a creative montage session, and I came up with two ideas. One was that I was interested in development, so human development, which would make sense given what I'd already done. And then the other part was, the thing that I missed out was that when I went to uni, I also started practicing yoga. So there was a kind of theme of, I suppose, Eastern philosophy, as well as Western, kind of running through my interests, so to speak. And I actually I actually trained to be a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. So it's worth pointing out that I did do that actually when I was in Camden. When I was working in Camden, I did it then, just before I had my children, thank goodness. I would never have done it if I'd have had them then. So when I was at the point of thinking about what it was that lit me up, human development and also movement. So that went back to my earlier passions, which I was telling you about earlier, which is around dance and movement and sort of physical movement and yoga, which is also physical movement. So it was really fascinating to just sort of give myself that space to actually reflect on what is it that I enjoy doing, what is it that I'm passionate about. And so those two themes emerged, I would say. It wasn't something I set out to do, it emerged. And that's how Grow With Your Flow came about. So grow with your flow. So the growth and the development side, and then the flow, which is more around movement. So that's how that came about. And actually Grow With Your Flow came about through my desire to run a retreat for women, which I did do as part of the TPPA. But then since then it's evolved even further, so it's kind of taken on a bit of a life of its own almost. So that's kind of how I came to do, to the present time, really. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour there, but
yes.
Yeah.
It is. Has there been any real learnings with setting up your own business?
I think that's a really interesting question, like learnings with setting up your own business. I think it's kind of all part and parcel for me, setting up my own business. So I have my own practice, and then I've got Grow With Your Flow, and then I've got leadership stuff that I do. And they're all at first I thought they were all these completely separate things, but what I've realized is actually they're not. They're linked, and you know, and actually one of the big things for me, I think, was having that belief, that self-belief, that you can branch out and do things that you would never have imagined that you could do. I would, if you'd have said to me when I was a student, you know, back doing my course in clinical psychology, that you would, you know, you're going to go and set up your own business, and you're going to set up an empowerment project, and you're going to do all these things, and I was just been like, really? Like, I would never have imagined that. So I think there's something about, you know, just believing that you can follow your dreams. I know it sounds cheesy. It does sound a bit cheesy, but feeling like you can follow those passions, you can make things happen if you can kind of overcome your self-limiting beliefs. So I think that for me was like one of the main things about setting up my own business, that I could do it. And yeah, and I'm, what is it now? 3 years, you know, that I've been running my own business, and I've loved it. I love the freedom that it brings. I love working for myself. I love the fact that I can try different things. I love the creative aspect of it. And so I've almost surprised myself with how much I've enjoyed it. So yeah, I think there's just something about believing in your own abilities and your own callings, so to speak. You know, that's what's been important for me, you know, in terms of learning. And also just delegating the things that you're no good at. You know, I think sometimes we can try and do too much, and that's, you know, what's going on there?
Oh yeah, we're terrible at that. We do everything. Yes.
Yeah, I think, you know, just knowing what you're good at, letting other people shine when they're good at their thing. That's been a really, you know, a big learning curve as well. Not trying to control everything, just saying, okay, well, I'm good at this, you know. So I have a bookkeeper, does my books. Thank goodness that I have her, because it's just not my bag. It's just not my thing. I don't do it very well. So, you know, I'd rather work alongside someone else who's really good and enjoys doing that, you know, ticking boxes and getting everything super orderly. And so it's fun as well, because I'm almost beginning to build my own team of people, and so it's not as isolating, because it can be quite isolating working on your own.
So that the TPPA for me was a really good community where I'm not alone. These are other psychologists that are doing similar things, and you know, building really good relationships, and of course getting to go and experience the gorgeous countryside where Wendys retreats happen in France. So I actually sat on the floor of Wendys kitchen, which is, you know, has underfloor heating, of course, and designed it. I'm looking up at the wall and designed our entire Inspiration North for James.
Oh,
So
that came up there, did it?
Yeah, I came back with this big, you know, flip chart sheet with loads of post-its on. I said, "We're going to do this, James." And I think James was a bit like, "What is this?"
Oh my goodness, here we go. Yeah. But isn't it wonderful that ability to have that time and space to come up with, you know, ideas and look at it now. It's I don't know what number I am, but
yeah, you'd be in the 80s.
Yeah, I'm in the 80s. It's a mature project now, right?
Yeah, and we've got a couple of universities looking at podcasts and how they're doing some thematic analysis on some of the stories to see if there's any common threads running through our guests. So yeah, it's fascinating, because we are, you know, this is a more massive research project, I suppose, at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it, isn't it?
Yeah. So of course we couldn't just do this for fun. We have to actually, you know, get some value out of it.
Well, I can relate to that as a researcher. You know, I love researching things. So even now, you know, I love finding out new things. It's fun, you know, at the end of the day.
No, it is definitely.
Yes. Mm.
So when Wendy calls you her witchy psychologist.
Yes. That was a really funny story, actually, because at the end of the TPPA, as you know, you get given feedback from Wendy, and everyone's always in anticipation of this feedback and what does Wendy think of you, and Wendy obviously being the coach on TPPA. And so I was really curious as to what feedback I might get, and I had, again, absolutely no idea, because perhaps I was slightly different from some of the others. I don't know, in the sense that I think some of the others on my course had more of a game plan than I did. I didn't really, it's like Becky Quick says to me, you just seem to just turn up. And that was probably true. I did just turn up because I hadn't really got a plan as to what I was really, well, I did have an idea of what I wanted to do, but that's not what happened. So anyway, going back to the feedback, so I was waiting there. I think I might have been the last one, or the last but one. So I was listening to all the feedback for everyone else and thinking, oh, that's really nice, etc. And then Wendy said to me, so Kat, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, she said to me, but I really like your witchiness. And I was like, wow. I can't remember. I'm sure she said some other things as well, but that was the thing that stuck out. And I was like, wow, I'd never imagined. But actually, when I think about it, we know, Wendy's an amazing coach. She really is. And she's really got such an ability to see the gifts that people have. And I think for me, because the witchiness is something around the more spiritual side of my work. So I am very much a holistic psychologist. I'm a very holistic coach. I'm a very holistic person generally, I suppose, through all the yoga and meditation that I do. But I'd never really considered that part of me as being a gift particularly. And I think we spoke about this, didn't we? And I think one of the things was that spirituality can mean so many different things to people. It can mean religion, which I'm not religious. It can mean so many, it has so many connotations, but for me it's just really about being connected to a higher power. And I know I could talk about this for a very long time. I'm not sure this is the right time to talk about it, but certainly for me there was something about coming out of the closet, in terms of because I started to write poetry as well. So I'm also a Reiki practitioner, so I started to get into Reiki. And as I started to get into Reiki, I started to become much more aware of other gifts that I had. And I think I've noticed that that's a real pattern for people as they become more, I suppose, aware, let's say, then they become more aware of the other gifts that they have. So I started to channel poetry, basically, is the only way I can describe it. So it would literally, it's not like I'd sit down and just start to make it up. It'd literally just flow through me. And so when Wendy sort of refers to that witchiness, it's something about being connected to forces that are, unseen, let's say. Let's put it like that. I don't mean dead people in that weird way. Someone said to me the other day, you don't deal with dead people. I said, no, not exactly, no. But just to qualify, I'm not a sort of psychic with a glass ball or anything. But that part of me is important, and I think it's so easy to hide away that part. And I think, in a way, if you think about it over generations, and if you think back to the witches, they were actually healers, weren't they? They were healers of the time, and of course then they got killed for being the powerful healers that they were. So I think that there's there's a lot in the consciousness of healers and people like me that keep us silent. And one of the big things for me is about trying to be more, because it's quite a difficult thing to articulate. But I think it's important. It's important to be able to be more visible now with who we are. And we talked a bit about this, didn't we, in our chat not so long ago?
Yep.
About that importance of being able to be true to who you are. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've described the witchiness well enough, but that's what I think it's about. It's about, having different.
Sometimes maybe there doesn't need to be a description. It's almost a certain magic and je ne sais quoi that you bring to coaching and being around you. Maybe that's enough.
Maybe that is enough. Yeah. And I suppose it's also, on a very basic level, it's about intuition as well, because I think in our society we're very much led by the mind, especially psychologists as well.
Has to be evidence-based and from science and research.
Cognitive behavioural therapy, that's the be all and end all. I don't actually practice that anymore because I just don't. It's not to say it's not useful, but I don't practice it. And I think part of the issue is that we've become so focused on the mind as being the dominant way to process information or understand things. And I think my process has been about actually connecting with a more of an inner wisdom as opposed to a external knowing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think there's something about actually valuing that, that gift, that skill, or whatever you want to call it, that way of being, which is around intuition. And I think that has been quite suppressed, let's say. But there is a kind of return of this way of working, which is much more connected to the kind of yin element, the feminine element, the divine feminine. So that's kind of something that's really quite important to me in my work. And that's really about helping people to connect to their own inner wisdom rather than and rather than all of the conditioning that we're sort of trained to think about. It's kind of unraveling that a little bit and trying to think, well, what is it that that you truly want, that you're truly passionate about? And sometimes it's really hard to find that because it's so covered up with all of these societal expectations and conditioning and fear, and that really the mind has all the answers, but in my experience that's not always the case. So I'm very interested in exploring a different way to support people to come to understand themselves. It's exciting, it really is. It's and I think especially now, with all of the kind of changes, with COVID and the whole situation with our planet, that things have changed so much. And I think we've got to adapt, we've got to change, we've got to find new ways of being if we're gonna move forward positively. So it's exciting, and and I thought that I would be working just with women as well mainly, but that's not the case either. I think it's just as relevant for men, which has been a real eye-opener as well. But then I suppose that's there's a masculine and feminine aspect within all of us, so that it actually makes a lot of sense. So I work very much with the kind of different aspects of feminine and the masculine and balancing those. So that's what my project seems to be evolving into. And it's really strange because my therapy work seems to be reflecting that as well. So who knows, that must be the magic happening. Because at one point I thought maybe I was, I didn't really want to do therapy anymore. But actually my clients are, I'm working a lot using a very holistic approach with my clients as well. So it's fun. I'm enjoying it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's all about trusting yourself as well, isn't it?
Yeah, trusting yourself, and you know, we're not really often encouraged to do that, are we?
Nope. You have to look to experts and leaders and politicians, and because
But
they know best, we don't know anything.
science and rational thought, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, that has its place, but it's not the only thing. It's not the holy grail of life. It's there's other ways of, you know, growing and exploring, and like you said, finding that inner knowing, because once you've found that inner knowing, then life really is quite magical. In my experience, things happen that you would never imagine, and you know, what's not to like about that? But I think we're so fear-based a lot of the time, aren't we? Oh, well, we can't do that because of this, or we haven't got enough time, or I'm not confident enough, or I'm not prepared enough, or there's so many reasons why we stop ourselves doing things. And I'm really, really interested in helping people overcome that. And I use my own experience to help inform that, because, you know, we all have those fears. So, you know, but for me, it's really important to overcome them as much as we can, so that we can explore our gifts and our callings in life.
That's true.
Awesome. Yeah.
Is there anything else you were interested in, James? I mean, you know, because I'd be curious to know what what it makes you think about as a man, I suppose, because I'm getting quite interested in this, because I started out my project and it was all about women and empowering women, and then I got a few male followers. And then I got someone messaged me who I know quite well, and they said to me, they were just telling me, they were saying something about that they found it really difficult to cry. And did that mean that they were mad, you know, crazy? And I was just sort of saying, well, you know, we all have this feminine element within us. You know, it's not just for women. It's not exclusive to women. So I started to get interested in that idea of working with men as well. I'm not doing any direct work. Well, I am in my therapy, but not in the coaching side of it. But eventually I could see myself doing more work with men and women. Because I think, you know, men can access their intuition too, and that, you know, it's really beneficial for men as well. It's not just exclusive to women. And why would it be? That would just be rubbish, wouldn't it? So anyway, yeah, I was just curious.
I think men are more, I think we're getting beyond the man as the sole breadwinner, and that it's, you know, to be a manly man, you're not supposed to cry, you don't talk about emotion. I see a lot more men getting into yoga and trying out reiki, and I think being much more open-minded with those sorts of things. And that there might be a few that might joke about it, but I think deep down you realize that in work, the softer skills become much more important as you go up a hierarchy.
True.
Therefore, I think the element of intuition when you're dealing with people is that you're trying to pick up on emotions and body language and trying to predict what may happen. So I think there's a strong correlation with more interest in men being attracted to things linked to spirituality, reiki, yoga, healthy eating, etc., etc. So
it's interesting what you say about the leadership stuff as well, because I think that's what I've come across as well, is that people, you know, the one thing that differentiates as you get more senior within leadership roles is the capacity to empathize and be able to have that compassionate element. Because who wants to be dictated to at the end of the day? You know, it's not a good style of leadership, right? So I think you're right. I think it has got a real relevance. It's not just woo-woo for the sake of it, right? There's a real practical reason why it would be useful to. But I think you're right. I think people are getting more interested in it, and I think that's really exciting. And yeah, you're
well positioned to take advantage of that.
Yes. And I think things are going to change. I think things are moving more in that direction, and of course, like you said, people do joke about it a bit, but I think it's I think it's good, it's positive.
Mm.
I think it also helps with relationships, because you get a bit more of a balance.
Agreed.
Yeah. Have you recorded that bit?
Yep.
Oh, we could probably put that bit in.
I know. I was thinking that.
It's
Really
juicy.
good. Like, oh, it's good. My inner journalist is like, we captured some really interesting information there.
I wasn't sure if I was like, part of my brain was going, are they recording that bit or not?
And we do transcripts and stuff, so you'll have the words as well at some point.
Yeah. No, it was a really interesting. I was genuinely curious to, know what James thought and what his observations were, because that's reflecting what I'm picking up. That not all men, but that men are becoming more interested in finding another way, from a wellness perspective as well, that, these things can improve overall well-being and improve so many things on so many levels. So it's really exciting and positive, and yes, hopefully I am well placed. And actually I have expanded the whole project to include men, because I think it's the way forward.
Definitely. Inclusivity.
Inclusivity, exactly right.
So should we move on to the quick fire round?
If we must. We'll leave that out if it goes really badly, okay?
Question number 1. So what is something you completely changed your mind about and went from believing one thing to believing the exact opposite?
Well, that's really interesting, because if we think about what we were talking about earlier, I moved from having a complete atheist perspective, which is, yes, non-believer, into a much more enlightened and aware, a much more, how would I describe it? I shifted into a different state of consciousness. That would be the best way to describe it. And as I did that, I became much more aware of energies and, because we're all made of energy at the end of the day. Certainly through the Reiki and what have you, that I became much more aware that it wasn't as simple as that there are forces beyond our that have an effect on you that can't be seen with the naked eye. And so, in that regard, and that was really as a result of actual experiences that I had. It wasn't just a change of idea. It was something I actually experienced. So I'd say that was probably one of the fundamental shifts that I've experienced, from believing one thing to having a much more open mind with regards to the universe and its influence on us, and the kind of way things connect, the interconnectedness of everything. Sounds a bit woo-woo, but there you are.
Sounds like Avatar. We rewatched this weekend.
Oh, we love that. I love that.
We're looking forward to the second one coming out.
Woo!
I know.
next year, isn't it? I think.
Yep. Oh, and what a segue. So moving on to second question.
Not as tricky, this question.
Yeah. What movie have you seen more than 7 times?
Oh, it's got to be. The movie that I've seen more than 7 times is The Wizard of Oz. I am a massive fan of The Wizard of Oz, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about that film and the fact that it begins in black and white, and she's it's all shot in black and white, isn't it? And then as soon as she ends up in the land of Oz, it goes to Technicolor, doesn't it? And then she goes on a magic adventure through the Wizard of Oz land and gets lots of friends on the way, and gets to see the wizard, and all amount of magical things happen. And there must have been something about that film from an early age, and the music and the dancing, and I just love it. And so every Christmas, when that comes on, I have to watch that.
Yep.
And question number 3, where is the most relaxing place you have been?
Oh my goodness. The most relaxing place I have been. I think probably Mauritius. Yeah, I think that's the most relaxing place I've been. And probably Australia, the Whit Sundays as well. That's beautiful. So those 2 places.
Lovely.
I keep mentioning that Australia's a lovely place to James. He's not been yet.
It's true. So I might
amazing.
take the podcast down under. Yeah, I need to work on my accent.
Oh, funny. So, if we had a time machine,
or we can click your heels twice and take you back to your 18-year-old self.
This is why we keep them around.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to her?
I would say for her to worry less and believe more in herself and her magical abilities.
Lovely.
Yeah.
You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. That's what I'd say to her.
That's lovely. So if somebody has been listening to this podcast and thinks, oh, I like the sound of Cat, where's the best place to find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Catherine_Baverstock. You can find me on Facebook, Grow With Your Flow. And those are my 2 platforms. And then you can find me on, I think it's drcatherinebaverstock.co.uk, and that's just my therapy website. But yeah, if you want the magic, it's the other 2.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kat. We really enjoyed chatting to you, and we're excited to see what happens in the next steps with men becoming more awakened and open to what you have to offer.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.